Écoutez, je vous propose de commencer. Tout d'abord, je remercie chaleureusement Madame la députée Caroline Roose pour co-organiser cet événement avec notre association. Je la remercie aussi chaleureusement pour son implication et son engagement pour les animaux aquatiques au Parlement européen. Donc, je suis Amandine Sanvisens, directrice de l'Aquatic Life Institute en Europe. Je remercie également l'association CIWF qui donc a immédiatement accepté de participer à ce webinaire et qui a fait un travail important sur l'élevage de pieuvres. Je remercie également Heather Browning de la London School Economics qui a participé et qui est co-autrice du rapport sur la sentience des céphalopodes, mais aussi des crustacés, notamment des capodes, et qui a fait un travail donc très important de vulgarisation. Et puis, je remercie toutes les personnes qui ont été impliquées dans l'organisation, et notamment Antoine Tiffy, qui est assistant parlementaire de Caroline Roose, et bien sûr les traductrices qui rendent cet événement plus accessible au plus grand nombre de personnes. Donc, merci beaucoup. Alors, avant de donner la parole à Madame la députée, je voudrais donc juste rappeler que à travers ce webinaire, nous souhaitons envoyer un signal fort aux institutions européennes pour leur demander d'impulser dès maintenant une réglementation interdisant l'élevage de pieuvres avant qu'ils ne s'installent au sein de l'Union européenne. Et bien sûr, ça s'inscrit, puisqu'actuellement la présidence de l'Union européenne est à la France, et donc nous souhaitons évidemment que le gouvernement français agisse dans cette direction et impulse publiquement cette direction vers l'interdiction de l'élevage de pieuvres au sein de la législation de l'Union européenne. Je suis très heureuse de vous annoncer que le journal français Le Monde publiera prochainement une tribune que j'ai eu l'honneur de co-signer avec Madame la députée Caroline Roose sur l'élevage de céphalopodes, et donc bien sûr pour demander l'interdiction de ce type d'élevage. N'hésitez pas au fur et à mesure à commenter ou à poser des questions dans le chat et nous essaierons de répondre à vos questions à la fin du webinaire. Donc surtout, n'hésitez pas, c'est fait pour ça. Donc sans plus attendre, je laisse la parole donc à Madame la députée Caroline Roose, que je remercie pour sa présence et pour sa participation. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup Amandine. Tout d'abord, je voulais vous remercier Amandine et toute l'équipe et Aquatic Life Institute pour l'initiative et l'organisation de ce webinaire. Aujourd'hui, ce qu'on va entendre grâce aux intervenantes, on va entendre toutes les raisons qui sont scientifiques pour lesquelles nous devons nous opposer à cet élevage de poulpes. Moi, je vais partager quelque chose qui est plus direct et plus intime en fait. Puisque non seulement je suis totalement convaincue qu'il faille interdire l'élevage de poulpes, mais j'en suis intimement persuadée puisque alors je viens d'une région qui est la région du sud de la France, puisque j'habite entre Nice et Cannes, et je fais souvent de la plongée parce que j'ai un rapport avec la mer qui est très particulier puisque j'ai été marin embarqué auparavant. Donc, je fais souvent de la plongée pour aller voir un petit peu ce qui se passe dans les fonds marins. Et en fait, je me suis vraiment aperçue que le poulpe, il était très sentient, puisque un jour, je me suis retrouvée face à lui en plongée. Et ce qui m'a percuté ce jour-là, c'est qu'en fait, quand on s'est croisés, il a totalement changé de couleur. En fait, il a blanchi, il est devenu blanc. Et le regard que j'ai vu, c'était un regard de terreur. Donc, je me suis aperçue que, en fait, il avait une sensibilité, que c'était un être sentient. Et après, ce que j'ai fait, parce que, comme je plonge régulièrement, j'ai voulu voir quelles étaient ses attitudes lors de mes différentes plongées. Et je me suis aperçue que c'était des êtres non seulement intelligents, mais joueurs. Avec certains, quand on passe un petit peu la tête, il y a un jeu qui s'installe, un peu un jeu de cache-cache, et on voit que ce sont des animaux qui ont besoin d'espace. J'ai discuté avec un pêcheur il n'y a pas très longtemps qui m'expliquait lui aussi sa rencontre avec une femelle poulpe qui protège son petit et avec une ventilation, puisqu'apparemment elle a le petit dessous. Et elle meurt, mais pas longtemps après avoir accouché du petit. Donc, pour moi, c'est des êtres qui sont très sensients. Et de tels animaux, ils ne doivent pas être enfermés pour être élevés. D'un point de vue politique, on est à un tournant, puisqu'on vient de voter la stratégie de la ferme à la fourchette, et elle prévoit un développement de l'aquaculture comme une alternative à la surpêche. J'ai des doutes sur ce point, mais bon, cette stratégie, elle prévoit aussi une révision complète des règles du bien-être animal, et ça doit être, selon moi, l'occasion de fixer des standards élevés en matière de bien-être animal dans l'aquaculture et d'interdire vraiment l'élevage de plusieurs espèces, et en premier rang l'espèce des poulpes. Je suis contente aussi puisqu'il n'y a pas très longtemps, j'ai travaillé sur la commission d'enquête sur le transport des animaux vivants. On a pu faire une mention, rajouter une mention sur ce rapport sur le bien-être animal des animaux aquatiques. Et ça, j'avoue que c'était une avancée sur ce texte-là. Donc, j'espère vraiment que le webinaire d'aujourd'hui, il permettra de vous en convaincre et qu'on puisse aujourd'hui avancer sur cette espèce-là. Merci beaucoup à tous et merci pour cette initiative.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la députée. Donc, je laisse la parole à William Bench, donc, qui est fondateur de l'Aquatic Life Institute.
Merci beaucoup, Amandine. Merci, Madame la députée. J'ai une petite présentation que je vais partager avec vous. Laissez-moi partager mon écran. Alors, attendez, je vais venir. Ouais, je vais partager cet écran. Alors, pardonnez-moi.
Je pense que c'est dans View, non?
Oui, oui, c'est ça normalement. Ah, voilà. Je recommence, désolé. Pardonnez-moi. Bon, on va faire comme ça. Bon, bah, en tout cas, ouais, merci beaucoup de participer au webinaire. On va faire un petit mot d'introduction sur l'Aquatic Life Institute. Donc, l'Aquatic Life Institute est une organisation que nous avons fondée qui se concentre sur le bien-être des animaux aquatiques. Comme beaucoup le savent, la sentience des animaux n'est plus à débattre. C'est assez clair, toute l'évidence scientifique est là et on est très honorés d'avoir Dr Elena LARA et Dr Heather Browning avec nous aujourd'hui qui vont approfondir un petit peu sur la sentience des poulpes. C'est assez clair pour le public que les animaux sont sentients. La plupart des Français ont soit eu un animal de compagnie dans leur jeunesse ou en ont un actuellement. Les Français ont l'habitude de prendre soin de leurs animaux de compagnie. Mais par contre, c'est une des plus grandes inconsistances de notre temps. Lorsqu'il se concerne les animaux de ferme, les Français ont l'habitude d'acheter des animaux d'élevage et de penser un petit peu moins aux conséquences éthiques de ces animaux. Dans le cas des poulpes, ces conséquences sont encore plus marquées. Les poulpes sont l'un des animaux les plus charismatiques. C'est assez clair qu'ils sont encore plus intelligents que d'autres individus. Jusqu'à aujourd'hui, personne n'élevait des poulpes. C'est une industrie qui n'existe même pas encore. Donc, ce n'est pas une question de défendre des emplois existants. Ce sont des emplois qui n'existent même pas encore. Et nous sommes justement, comme disait Madame la députée Caroline Roose, à un moment pivotal. C'est le moment où, d'un côté, l'Union européenne est en train de pousser sa stratégie, de revoir sa stratégie de bien-être animal. Comme le disait Amandine, c'est également la période où la France a la chance d'avoir la présidence de l'Union européenne. C'est donc un moment parfait pour intervenir. Mais également, comme on le mentionne, c'est exactement l'année, donc à quelques mois près, où l'un des premiers élevages de poulpes vient d'être ouvert. Donc, ce qu'on aimerait dire, donc voilà, comme on l'a dit, nous, l'Aquatic Life Institute, on a été créé en 2019. On se concentre sur le bien-être des animaux aquatiques. Mais l'un des aspects les plus importants de notre démarche, c'est que nous avons une démarche collaborative. Nous ne souhaitons pas prendre des positions extrêmes. Nous voulons vraiment travailler avec tous les stakeholders, donc que ce soit au niveau policy, producteur, certifier et autres NGO, pour trouver des solutions communes. Alors, pourquoi cette conférence? Donc, comme nous l'avons mentionné, le consensus scientifique est vraiment très clair. Pendant longtemps, on a entendu par certains membres de l'industrie certains doutes sur la sentience des poissons. Ces doutes n'étaient pas bien fondés. Les poissons sont tout à fait sentients. Dans le cas des poulpes, c'est encore plus clair que pour les autres poissons. J'ai vraiment beaucoup aimé votre anecdote, Madame la députée, que vous avez été face à ce poulpe. C'est frappant. Et quiconque a été face à un animal a pu voir dans les yeux d'un animal sa souffrance et, j'ai envie de dire, son âme. Ça devient très clair que ces individus peuvent avoir des émotions et peuvent souffrir. Et à partir du moment où on accepte que ces individus peuvent avoir des émotions, peuvent souffrir, ça devient une obligation morale de prendre en compte leur bien-être dans nos décisions. On ne dit pas nécessairement qu'on devrait bannir toute forme d'élevage ou que tout le monde devrait devenir vegan, mais par contre, il y a quand même des limites qu'on devrait pouvoir fixer et en l'occurrence, interdire l'élevage de poulpes, ce devrait être une limite très claire pour tout le monde. Et enfin, la présidence française est une excellente opportunité pour ça. Nous appelons donc la Commission européenne, le Parlement et les gouvernements des États membres à agir. C'est vraiment l'occasion de s'immiscer dans le débat, de prendre une décision qui, encore une fois, n'aurait aucun impact économique, ça n'affecterait aucun producteur existant parce qu'on a juste une seule ferme qui a été créée en Europe jusqu'à maintenant. Personne ne serait affecté. Ce serait une très grande victoire pour protéger ces animaux fantastiques. Bon, pour faire une petite blague, certains pensent même qu'ils sont extraterrestres. Il y a des hypothèses que les poulpes sont extraterrestres. Et nous invitons le gouvernement français à lancer le mouvement en prenant position sans ambiguïté. Donc, merci beaucoup, Amandine. C'est la fin de ma présentation. Et sur ce, je pense que nous allons céder la parole à Dr Elena Browning. Et merci encore à tous pour votre participation.
Merci, William. Oui, exactement. On va laisser donc la parole à Dr Elena Dr Elena LARA, donc, qui est chercheuse à l'association CIWF dans l'équipe bien-être des poissons, et elle est l'autrice donc du rapport Élevage intensif de pieuvres, la recette d'un désastre, que je vous encourage vraiment à lire. Il est disponible sur le site de l'association et je vais vous mettre le lien dans le chat.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen.
Yes.
I don't know if I can do it if William is still sharing. I don't know.
William, je crois qu'il faut que tu arrêtes le partage d'écran. Alors d'abord, William, tu peux couper ta présentation.
Ah ouais, c'est bon, j'ai trouvé.
Voilà, merci. Okay. Et donc, Elena, tu peux l'afficher.
Please let me know when you can see my presentation.
Alors, pour le moment, on ne la voit pas encore. Alors, je ne sais pas s'il y a un petit bug. Est-ce que tu peux l'enlever et la remettre peut-être? Parce que là, il y a un écran noir.
Okay, sorry, I need to put the interpretation. Say it again, please.
Could you try again, please? Thank you very much.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
No, it's just black. I don't know why.
The screen is sharing though, but yeah.
So you cannot say.
I don't know if that could make sense. That maybe Dr. Elena LARA, you sent the presentation to Amandine, who can forward it to the office of Mrs. Rose, and in the meantime, maybe Dr. Heather Browning can take the floor. I don't know if that could make sense, and therefore we'll be able to share the presentation from the office of Mrs. Rose.
Okay.
Okay, so please, Elena, could you send me by mail? I don't know why
I'm gonna do it now.
And if it's okay, Dr. Heather Browning, you can begin first.
Yep, no problem. Let's see if it works for me.
Donc, je vais présenter quand même Dr Heather Browning, donc, qui travaille sur la sentience des animaux et qui fait partie de l'équipe de la London Economic Schools, qui a produit donc le rapport sur la sentience des céphalopodes, mollusques et crustacés décapodes, qui est un rapport très très important qui a été commandé par le gouvernement britannique et qui est également disponible librement sur le site de la LSE et qu'on va mettre dans le chat. Merci beaucoup, je vous laisse la parole.
Okay, thank you. So my presentation is showing up okay on the screen? Yes, okay, excellent. So yes,
it's okay, thank you.
Okay, good. So yes, I'm going to be talking today about the sentience of cephalopods, in particular drawing on the work that my team did when we were producing a report on the sentience of cephalopods and decapods recently for the UK government. So to start with, what do I mean by sentience? So when we talk about sentience, what we're thinking about is the capacity for an animal to have feelings. So these are mental states, they're sometimes called affects, that have a positive or negative valence. That is, you know, they're sort of good or bad from the point of view of the animal. And often this is talked about just as pleasures or pains, but it also includes a whole range of other things as well, like the ability to feel hunger or thirst or joy, comfort, curiosity, social bonds, all these things, as long as they're feelings that have a subjective character, that there's something that it's like to feel them, as opposed to just like an unconscious reflex. So an animal that has the capacity for these is one that we consider to be sentient. And importantly, when we think of sentience, it's not just the same thing as intelligence. So, you know, particularly when we talk about octopuses, one of the things about them is they are very intelligent animals. They're really good at solving a lot of different problems. And that's going to be relevant, of course, to what sort of conditions we keep them in. But it's not necessarily the same as being sentient. An animal doesn't have to be an intelligent animal in order to have these basic feelings, to be able to have pleasure or to be able to suffer. And so when we're thinking about sentient animals, we're thinking about something more than just whether or not it's intelligent. So why is it that sentience matters? The first thing is it has an ethical significance. That is, that we think that the capacity to suffer or feel pleasures is something that matters to us morally. And this traces all the way back to Jeremy Bentham, who famously has this quote where he says, you know, the question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And the idea is that if an animal is one that can suffer, that's an animal that should matter morally to us. And that's where we should be thinking about their well-being and thinking about how we treat them. And there's also now a social and political significance. So increasingly, we're seeing legislations across the world that are using sentience to ground, you know, which animals deserve protection and what kinds of protection they get. So some parts of Australia, New Zealand, the EU Treaty of Lisbon have all sort of enshrined sentience within their animal protection. So this recognition of the fact that some animals can suffer is now grounding the way that we treat them. And particularly within the context of the UK, recently we've had this animal welfare sentience bill, which is still moving through Parliament. And as part of that, they wanted to think about which animals should it cover. So the Animal Welfare Sentience Bill wants to, you know, legally recognise the sentience of animals and consider that when government decision making, but they needed to think about which animals that covered. And so our team at the LSE were called in to produce a report reviewing all the evidence for the sentience in cephalopods and decapods to see whether or not they were warranted inclusion in this report. And today I'll be talking particularly about the stuff we did on cephalopods, since it's relevant to this octopus farming debate. So the first thing we had to do is we had to think, what were our criteria for figuring out if an animal was sentient? And so for the purposes of this report, we decided to focus on the capacity to experience pain, even though, like I said, pain is only one of many different types of experience an animal can have. We think that pain has a special kind of moral significance because it's one of the main sources of suffering. And an animal that can experience pain is likely to be one that can experience this wider range of different feelings as well. And the important thing is that we needed to distinguish the experience of pain, that bad feeling of pain, just from a non-conscious experience of nociception, which is just the body detecting damage to the tissues and responding to it. And that can be done in an unconscious or reflexive way. So we needed to go beyond that and show that these animals actually could feel pain, that they could suffer. And so to do this, we looked at a set of criteria that ranged across different physiological, cognitive, and behavioural indicators to bring together sort of a picture of the evidence for sentience. And so running through what these criteria are, the first one was possession of nociceptors. These are nerves in the tissue that are able to detect damage. Obviously, these on their own are not sufficient for an animal to be sentient. An animal can detect tissue damage without feeling it, but they're very unlikely to feel pain if they're unable to detect it in the first place. So this is more like a background condition. Then the second condition is the possession of integrative brain regions. And these are complex areas in the brain that bring in the inputs from all different parts of the body, all different kinds of feelings, and bring them together for learning and memory and for guiding complex action. The third one was looking for connections between the nociceptors and the integrative brain regions. So making sure that these pain signals were actually being included in this processing for the animals. The fourth thing was looking at whether the responses that animals make to potential noxious stimuli in their environment, so the things that might be harming them, whether those responses change either through local anesthetics or analgesics, or even endogenous ones. So there might be ones inside the animal, as we have, opioids inside our own brains that modulate our experiences of pain. And then there are also external ones that we can take. So looking at whether or not animals' behavior is affected by these things. The fifth, the behavioral criteria, was looking at whether an animal was capable of performing motivational trade-offs. That is, it could balance different threats against different rewards. So, whether or not, again, this is sort of related to this integrative brain region, taking all these inputs from different things in its environment and figuring out how much of one thing it was willing to risk in order to gain something else. The sixth was flexible self-protective behaviors in response to injury and threat. And for this, we're looking at things like guarding of limbs. So we think of humans when they're injured, they'll do things, like guard their limbs, they'll move less, they might, rub or touch the injured site. And we look for things like that in other animals too. The seventh criterion was the ability to perform associative learning, that beyond just the simple sort of habituation and sensitization, which are very simple forms of associative learning, but more complex learning, where they're able to associate different parts of their environment with positive or negative stimuli. And the final one was behavior that shows that the animals value local anesthetics or analgesics when they're injured. So this is related before to saying that, that their behavior might be modulated by these, but showing that an animal actually places value on that they'll work to receive an anesthetic or an analgesic in order to stop their pain when they are injured. We thought that could be quite strong evidence that an animal is feeling pain. So importantly, when we put together this picture, we weren't thinking that any of these criteria was on their own necessary or sufficient. It wasn't the case that any one of those, you could just look at it, and if the animal had it, you'd tick the box and say, yes, definitely sentient. What we were thinking about more was the strength of the overall evidential picture, bringing together all these different lines of evidence, the physiology, the brain anatomy, the behavior of the animal, and saying, looking at all of this evidence together, do we think that it's more or less likely, given all this, that the animal is sentient? And so we went through hundreds of scientific papers, basically everything we could find that's ever been written on these abilities within cephalopods and decapods. And this will give you a nice example, actually, of one of the sorts of things that we talked about. So this is a paper that came out last year. It was really well placed just before we submitted the reports. We were able to modify some of our findings based on this. And this was looking whether or not octopuses could form conditioned place preferences. And a conditioned place preference is basically whether or not an animal prefers one place over another, and whether you can change that preference based on what it experiences in those places. And so this is about forms of learning, but it's also about making trade-offs as well. And so for these octopuses, they had two different places here represented by the stripes and the spots. And we looked to see whether or not they preferred one or the other. And then what you do is in one of those chambers, the octopus would receive an injection of a noxious stimuli, of acetic acid, which hurts its arm theoretically. And then we looked at them again, and we saw that the octopuses that received that injection would start avoiding the chamber in which they received that injection, even if they'd previously liked it. Whereas octopuses that just received an injection of saline, which shouldn't be painful, they showed no such preference. And then when we took these octopuses again and gave them an injection of a local anesthetic, of lidocaine, that should stop that pain experience, we found that the animals then came to prefer the chamber in which they'd received that analgesic or that anesthetic. So again, a chamber that they might previously have disliked, they came to like, because for them it was associated with the reward of receiving this anesthetic, but only if they'd previously received the painful stimulus. So animals showed no preference for lidocaine if they had only received a saline injection. That didn't bother them at all. But if they had received acetic acid, which we think should be painful for them, they would show a very strong preference for going into the chamber where that pain had been relieved. And so we took this as evidence that they do value, this is the 8th criterion, that they value this anesthetic when they're pain. And we looked at their behavior. We read the paper, and Crook had looked at their behavior when they received the noxious stimulus and found that animals that were feeling pain, they showed changes in their behaviors. They were grooming that arm where the injection had been received. They would remove some of the skin there, and they would hide themselves more. And also bringing in this sort of physiological data as well, that the brachial connective neurons, which basically take the information from the arm up into the brain, showed a very high amount of activity at that time, showing that these sort of noxious stimuli were being processed in the higher brain regions. So this was a really nice example of a single study that ticked a lot of these boxes to show for us that octopuses could do a lot of the things that we associate with sentience. And so on balance, having looked at all that data, this is a table here that summarizes for all the different types of cephalopods what we found. And these are VH means very high. That's our confidence that the animal satisfied this criteria. H for high, M for medium, L for low, VL for very low. And you can see particularly for octopuses, we had high or very high confidence for almost every single one of these. And that's because there's been a lot of work done, and they just show that octopuses, undoubtedly meet all of these criteria. And where we found that we didn't have very high or high confidence where these lows or mediums show up, it's because the studies haven't been done. It's not because they've been done and the octopuses were shown to fail. So this is partly just a call for more research as well. But coming out of this, we were very confident that cephalopods and particularly octopuses were sentient animals. And so based on this, we recommended that the cephalopod was, and we had similar findings for the decapods as well, by the way, that they met enough criteria that they should be regarded as sentient animals for the purposes of the UK animal welfare law. Nice thing is this was taken into account, so they were actually added. So the bill was altered to include cephalopods and decapods, which we counted as quite a big win. And this was taken up around the world, which I thought was really positive, that all these media outlets and a lot of people were very, very positive about these findings. And so just to finish up, bring this back to the context of the octopus farming, we also looked at some recommendations regarding particular welfare risks to animals. And one of the things we looked at were what are the welfare risks to cephalopod aquaculture. And I won't go through these in any detail because I'm sure we're going to hear a bit more about this, but here's a big list of all the different things that we thought would be welfare risks for octopuses kept in an aquaculture situation, that octopus farming has risks of all these different harms. And so based on that, we also came up with our final recommendation. There we go. That we had very high confidence that high welfare commercial farming of cephalopods is currently impossible. And based on that, we recommended that the UK government not only put a preemptive ban on octopus farming ever starting up in the UK, but also potentially a ban on importing farmed octopuses into the UK as well, to send a signal that we disapprove of this practice wherever it's happening as well. So thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation très importante et très enrichissante. Alors, on va laisser la parole donc à Dr Elena LARA. Antoine, est-ce que tu peux essayer de faire la présentation? Ah ben superbe, ça marche. Donc je vais mettre le lien du rapport de CIWF dans le chat, vous dire qu'il existe aussi en version française, et aussi vous rappeler que donc on est très heureuse d'avoir CIWF avec nous aujourd'hui, qui est aussi membre de notre coalition qui s'appelle l'Aquatic Animal Alliance, et avec qui on essaye donc, avec une coordination de nombreuses associations partout dans le monde, donc d'améliorer significativement les conditions de vie des animaux aquatiques, voilà, en élevage notamment. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, so now the presentation is working, right? Good.
Yes.
Finally. So hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me here today to talk about Compassion in World Farming report on octopus farming. Next slide, please. So I am Elena LARA, and I work for Compassion as a research manager. And Compassion is an animal welfare environmentalist NGO with offices around the world, including in many countries in Europe, and a policy office in Brussels. Also, there is a specialized team of experts on aquatic animals welfare, which I'm part of. And we work to end factory farming, a practice that involves huge animal suffering and high environmental impacts. So we advocate for a more sustainable and regenerative models of produced food that, of course, takes into account the welfare of and the well-being of the animals involved. So to do so, we lobby governments, we engage in a positive way with food business, and we carry out campaigns for the public, general public, and for consumer awareness. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to explain the work that we have been doing around octopus farming, the octopus farming issue. First, I would like to talk a little bit about octopus. We know now that it has been scientifically proved, as the previous speaker has shown, that octopus are sentient, intelligent, and complex animals. Next slide. In fact, there is scientific evidence that octopus have, for example, emotional response, long and short-term memory, can use tools, and most importantly, they are able to feel pain. Next slide. So octopus have extraordinary features. If you can click the video, please. I don't know if you can see the video.
Sorry, the videos are not working here.
Okay. Okay, it's fine. So if you can just go back 2 slides, please. Another one? Yeah, well, the idea of this video was to show you the extraordinary feature of octopus, that they have to change the shape and color of their skin. And it's really well shown in this video. I really like it. So, well, and the other main point was like that octopus are colorblind. So it is quite surprising that they can do this. And this change of shape and color, they can do it thanks to a tiny organs that they have in their skin. And in the next slide, it was also another video showing that also octopus perform complex behaviors. And in the video, it was shown an octopus carrying a shell that they usually use as a mobile dens, or also they use this. Okay, we cannot see anymore my presentation. Well, yeah, in this video, it was shown how the octopus was carrying the shell, and also how they use it as protective shelter. Okay, let's finish with the videos that are not working very well. And let's go with the next slide. Yeah, exactly. So octopus are also high value, and we all know that. For the previous slide, please. This one. Okay. It's okay, you can put the entire slide. Yeah. So octopus are also highly valued for human consumption, as we all know. In fact, wild-caught octopus have been consumed all over the world. In the first figure, where data of octopus consumption by continent is represented, you can see that octopus consumption is higher in Asia and in Europe. And in the second one, I want to show you also the consumption of octopus, but only in the EU. And also we have included data for the United States. So we can see that Italy and Spain are the main consumers, and also that there has been high demand in some other countries and some other markets, and especially in the United States. So growing market demand and rising prices due to the decrease of wild octopus stocks have made food industries eager to farm octopus in captivity. And with these 2 screenshots of these 2 articles, I want to show you like that the Spanish company has announced publicly that in Spain, octopus farming is going to be ready at commercial level by 2023. So in compassion, given the serious concerns of this potential industry, we published last October a report called Octopus Factory Farming, a recipe for disaster. So here in this report, we gathered all the existing scientific knowledge, and we also analyzed the welfare and environmental implications of this new industry. Next slide, please. So, So in the report, this is the executive summary of the report. We have shown them the 8 main reasons why octopus farming should never be allowed to happen and it should be banned. So in this presentation, what I want to do is to show you and to address in detail the reasons that we have highlighted in the report. Next slide. So one of the reasons is that we don't have the proper knowledge of the welfare needs. For example, octopus are more likely to suffer in the intensive farms because they are naturally solitary animals. Intensive farms are characterized by crowded conditions and high stocking densities. So this stressful situation for them can result in poor welfare and lead to aggression or even cannibalism. They are also highly inquisitive and intelligent animals, which does not match with the condition of mass production farms that have barren, controlled, and sterile environments. Octopus are also fragile creatures because they do not have an external or internal skeleton. Their fast jet-propelled locomotion means that if they are confined in small spaces, they can easily be injured by crashing into tank walls or cages. Therefore, there is a high risk of pain and suffering from injuries that are likely to occur during common practices in farms. Next slide. So one of the most important issues related to octopus farming is that there is not scientifically validated method for humane slaughter octopus. So current methods are cruel and cause suffering, and there is not humane method available. So octopus have a very complex decentralized nervous system, which consists in the brain and the nervous systems of the arms. So this makes these complicated nervous systems makes very challenging to humane kill them because it's difficult to perform in a very quick way the destruction of the brain and to render the animal instant unconscious. Next slide. Okay, other problem to farm octopus is that they are carnivorous. So decades of research has established that the cultivation of carnivorous species pose high sustainability risks. This is because huge numbers of wild fish will be caught and reduced into fish meal and fish oil that are key ingredients of feed for carnivorous species such as octopus. The problem is that around 20–25% of all wild caught fish are used to make fish meal and oil, but most of the fish, around 90%, to produce fish meal could be used for human consumption. So this is a very unsustainable practice. As I mentioned before, octopus are carnivorous and need a high quality diet that includes live prey and high number of fish. So therefore, farm octopus cannot be part of a sustainable food system. Next one. Okay, other important issue is that they are not covered by welfare legislation. The EU holds several legislative acts that protect farm animals. However, invertebrates are excluded from their scope. And octopus are invertebrates, and therefore there is not current legislation to protect their welfare in farming conditions. Next one. So, other important point is that octopus farming is not compatible with the new EU strategic aquaculture guidelines published in May 2021. These guidelines specifically encourage producers to limit the use of fish meal and fish oil produced from wild-caught fish. Also, the guidelines propose that EU aquaculture diversifies, introducing low-trophic species that do not need feed, such as herbivorous fish, mollusks, or seaweed. As we explained before, octopus farming will highly depend on fish meal and fish oil, since they are carnivorous. So therefore, the development of octopus farming appears to be odds with the new European strategy and should not be developed and based on these principles. And the next one. So in conclusion, for all the reasons mentioned previously and during the presentation, Compassion is asking for a ban on octopus farming. It is very concerning for us if politicians allow the development of this industry to continue. So the factory farming of intelligent and carnivorous species is not the right way forward. We need to shift towards environmentally friendly aquaculture that respects the welfare of the animals involved. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation très importante. J'ai mis donc les différents liens du rapport de CIWF à la fois en français et en anglais dans le chat, donc n'hésitez pas à le lire et à le partager. Et je vous ai également mis notre rapport sur ce qu'on appelle the blue loss, donc qui est l'impact en fait de toute la pêche destinée à nourrir les animaux aquatiques d'élevage et qui est vraiment désastreux aussi bien en termes de souffrance animale qu'en termes de chute de la biodiversité et puis aussi de réchauffement climatique. Donc n'hésitez pas à le lire. Je vais laisser le mot de la fin à Madame la députée, puis ensuite on prendra des questions. Donc si vous avez des questions ou même des commentaires, des remarques, surtout n'hésitez pas à les mettre dans le chat en français ou en anglais et on les lira.
Merci Amandine. Je vais faire un petit peu un lien avec mon retour de mission puisque je reviens du Sénégal où on est allé voir un petit peu ce qui se passait au Sénégal suite à la signature des accords de pêche. Et comme on parle de farine de poisson, on voit l'impact de l'utilisation des farines de poisson puisque sur l'exemple du Sénégal, donc on pêche de la sardinelle qui est qui sont des petits pélagiques. Nous, on parle de développer une aquaculture intensive avec des poissons, des invertébrés carnivores. Pour ça, il faut de la farine de poisson. Pour avoir de la farine de poisson, il faut pêcher de la sardinelle, mais au détriment de la sécurité alimentaire des pays d'Afrique, puisque la sardinelle est pêchée notamment au Sénégal et sur certains pays d'Afrique. Donc, on va encore une fois développer ça. On est en train de piller les ressources qu'il y a en Afrique pour nourrir l'aquaculture avec ces farines de poisson. Il y a vraiment une incohérence totale et c'est pour ça que d'autant plus. Alors moi, je suis amoureuse du poulpe, c'est vrai, je l'avoue, mais pour toute forme d'aquaculture intensive et toutes les utilisations de farine de poisson, déjà, il faut arriver à trouver un substitut d'alimentation pour ces systèmes d'aquaculture et comme l'a dit le docteur Elena LARA et le docteur Ether, le poulpe a un système de propulsion, c'est ce qu'on disait tout à l'heure, il a donc forcément un manque de place, il a besoin de se déplacer et c'est pour toutes ces raisons-là qu'il ne faut absolument pas développer cette aquaculture pour les poulpes et je tenais vraiment à vous remercier beaucoup pour vos interventions et vos présentations aujourd'hui et moi je ne vais pas manquer de continuer à travailler sur le sujet et avec vous bien sûr pour faire en sorte que au sein de la commission, on puisse mettre la pression pour enfin que le bien-être animal sur tous les animaux aquatiques soit vraiment pris en compte aujourd'hui. Et quand on parle de cette entreprise espagnole qui annonce qu'en 2023, on va développer l'élevage de pieuvres, en 2023, on revoit la législation sur le bien-être animal. Où est la cohérence? Donc voilà. Donc en tout cas, merci pour tout ça et je vous relaisse la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, on a plusieurs questions et commentaires dans le chat, donc je vais les lire dans la langue dans laquelle elles sont. Et puis, si vous souhaitez répondre, surtout n'hésitez pas. Alors, on a une première question de Franck qui nous demande comment sont pêchées les pieuvres aujourd'hui. Alors, c'est un peu à la limite de notre webinaire qui est sur l'élevage, mais s'il y a une réponse, n'hésitez pas. Et est-ce que ce n'est pas déjà incompatible avec la sentience des céphalopodes? Et enfin, j'aimerais avoir votre avis sur la chasse sous-marine, donc des pieuvres. Donc, je ne sais pas s'il y en a qui souhaitent apporter des réponses. Alors, parce que c'est vrai que c'est un peu à la limite de cette présentation, mais alors moi, je ne sais pas exactement précisément sur la question de la pêche des pieuvres. Après, sur la sentience des céphalopodes, ben, évidemment, il s'agit de les pêcher et donc de les tuer, donc forcément, ça pose question. Après, en termes de souffrance, je pense que ce n'est pas du tout... c'est très loin d'être similaire à la question de l'élevage, hein, où c'est toute une vie en captivité avec un environnement qui est totalement vide. Mais évidemment, ça pose la question évidemment de la souffrance et de la mise à mort. Oui, Madame la députée, je crois que vous avez quelque chose à dire.
Non, je vais pas. J'allais un petit peu répondre la même chose par rapport à la pêche de la pieuvre, enfin du poulpe. Aujourd'hui, on a la pêche récréative qui pêche du poulpe de différentes façons. Pour ce qui est de la chasse sous-marine, c'est pareil. On se retrouve avec un certain nombre d'acteurs de la pêche de loisirs qui pêchent le poulpe. En général, en chasse sous-marine, ils pêchent le poulpe au harpon. La problématique qu'il se passe en chasse sous-marine, c'est vous tirez sur une cible, on va dire, entre guillemets, sauf que vous savez pas où vous tirez et que l'animal souffre énormément. On en revient un petit peu au système d'abattage. On en revient un petit peu à la même chose. En chasse sous-marine, je ne vois pas où est le bien-être animal.
Oui, complètement. Et aussi rajouter que ce soit pour la pêche professionnelle ou pour la pêche de loisirs, voilà, il faut vraiment souligner et insister sur le fait qu'aujourd'hui, il n'y a aucune réglementation en France, au sein de l'Union européenne, qui vise à limiter la souffrance des animaux aquatiques. Et que donc, ça pose énormément de questions parce qu'en fait, tout est possible en termes de souffrance et que les animaux peuvent agoniser pendant longtemps. Et rappeler que sur la pêche de loisirs, il n'y a aucune formation. Donc, c'est-à-dire que n'importe qui peut se mettre à pêcher des animaux aquatiques et que ça pose vraiment des questions importantes sur la souffrance animale. Alors, je vais ensuite poser donc la question de Augustine. Donc, c'est en anglais. Do we know how Nueva Pescanova is actually keeping their farm octopus? They claim, of course, that their welfare is a top concern of theirs. But have they published or shared any information about how they are kept, they stay, their level of stress?
Yeah, I think that one it's for me, right? So, yeah, I mean, I've been reading these public articles where they say that they are taking into account the welfare of these animals. But as you mentioned in your question also, like they are not giving details. So this is, for me, it's the same thing that not saying anything, you know. So we would like to really know the details and how they are gonna planning to farm them, which one are the stocking densities, the size of the tanks, how many animals per tank. So we need to know a lot of stuff. Also, like these animals, as I mentioned in my presentation, are quite fragile and they are solitary, and so I can also imagine that the procedures in the common practice in farms, like the handling and all this stuff, I think that it's the probability that they are injured is quite high. So also we would like to know which one it's going to be the measures that they are going to take in these typical procedures in farms. So, but they are not saying anything. And I think that the issues are quite concerning for them to keep quiet. So they also claim that it's for industry interest, but I think that this is not enough. I mean, you are dealing with animals and the welfare of animals that are sentient beings. So I think that they should not keep in this silence, that they decide to keep in from the beginning that we publish our report, and a lot of media articles have come up. And I think that it's quite concerning that they should stop being quiet and say the conditions that they are planning to apply in the farms. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup, Elena. Alors ensuite, on a une question de Merin. Where is investment for the development of octopus farming currently coming from? Have new companies been established, or are current aquaculture companies diversifying?
Well, yeah, as far as I know, the main octopus farming funding, come from the Spanish government. I know that there's a lot of national investigation projects that the octopus farming project. And right now, I think it's in the hands of a private company. So because, well, they want to develop it at mass scale. And I know what they have said also in public articles that they want to apply to European funds, the next generation ones, I think. And for me, it could be quite concerning because Europe has like published the strategic guidelines that they want for aquaculture. So for me, it would be very surprising if the EU funds this kind of project. And as far as I know, the company that it's working on that, it's the Spanish one, Pescanova. I know that in other countries, there are more companies trying to also establish octopus farming, but as I'm not 100% sure and there's not enough information, I prefer not just like to say some details, but yeah, there's several countries behind also to implement this new practice. And now that publicly we know that Nueva Pescanova, it's the one that it's planning to start it very soon.
Merci. Alors, nous avons un commentaire de Doc, donc, qui est responsable du groupe Bien-être des poissons au sein de l'Eurogroup for Animals, dont notre association fait partie. Donc, je vais lire son commentaire. Eurogroup for Animals and its 82 member organizations make this call together for the farming of these complex solitary carnivorous animals to be prohibiting before it emerges. Voilà, donc merci beaucoup Doc pour ce commentaire. Alors ensuite, Eva qui aimerait en savoir plus sur comment... Alors je vais lire son commentaire. Can you please tell us a little bit about how octopuses will live on farms? Is the idea still for them to inhabit small cubicles, etc.? Or people try to pull octopuses out of their dens, tearing their bit? Oh, it's awful.
Yeah, well, I think that the second comment is about trying to reply to one of the first questions, the fisheries of wild octopus. So yeah, I also knew that in Spain, also like to make a small comment about that. It's just like, I know that it's commonly used traps. So the traps are put in the sea one day and with a live prey. And the next day they come back to see if an octopus have like, it's in the trap or not. And then also we know that the methods of killing these animals once they are fish, it's quite cruel. And so yeah, and as you mentioned, there's no regulation as the norm in wild fisheries. About the octopus on farms, how it's going to be the conditions, again, we don't know. I mean, I've been reading some articles that they say more or less that they need to adapt the animals because right now they are, I mean, in the meantime that they are doing, they have been doing investigation, they needed to catch the octopus from the wild and put it in tanks. So we know that first the animal, right now it's, I know that they already have 5 generations that octopus farm, you know. But at the beginning, when they were like catching wild octopus to investigate the process, so we knew that they need a period of adaptation because again, they're solitary animals, and if you put them in a tank with several other individuals, or there's problem of aggression, and they don't feel comfortable, and so. That's the only thing that we know, and that they were like quite separated in the tanks, but that they were able to see each other. So it was called like the adaptation period. So they can see and they adapt that other octopus are in the tank before to move them in other tanks. But again, we don't know how many animals they are going to plan to put in tanks, which one is the size of the tanks, any other conditions, have no idea. Sorry.
Alors, nous avons donc 2 questions de la même personne, donc Garadi Rodriguez Valle, donc que je vais lire. In Spain, the Spanish Institute of Oceanography has spent 30 years researching the breeding of the octopus, its welfare need, food, etc. Why do Elena say that there is not enough research? The Spanish company has been working on octopus since 2005 with the Spanish Institute of Oceanography.
I cannot see the comment.
Alors, C'est dans questions et réponses. It's answer and question.
Okay.
Box. Yeah, you can
Okay. Yeah, I can see now. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not enough research. There's research that has been done to close the biological cycle of octopus, and it has been done by the Spanish Institute of Oceanography. But I think that there's not enough knowledge to produce at mass scale these animals. You know, it's different. For me, I'm also a scientist. And for me, it makes completely sense that biologists, I am a biologist, wants to learn and to know about the biological cycle of octopus. So it's a basic knowledge that it's interesting, and also they are interesting animals. So it's completely fine. For me, the mass production of octopus, it's a bad use of science, you know? So I know that a lot of research has been done. I mean, Spain has been spent, I don't know how many, maybe 20 years to be able to close the cycle and to farm the octopus. So of course there's research, but I think that we don't know enough to put this, I mean, in the mass production scale, we don't know how these animals are gonna react or how it's gonna be, or which one are the welfare needs that these animals need if high stocking densities are high. It's not the same if you keep 1 or 2 animals in tank to do your research. Also in octopus are covered by scientific legislation, you know, and also every time that you need to do an experiment in Spain, you need to go through an ethical committee to perform this experiment. So these animals that are used for science are really controlled and the welfare is really taken into account. And also scientists try to make like a humane slaughter practice for them, but when it comes like for mass production, intensive production, I think that this is completely different.
Can I just say something on this as well? Just that as far as I understand as well, pretty much all this research has been done on health and nutrition and almost nothing on psychological welfare and natural behavior, which is a huge part of the welfare of animals as well. So their welfare needs in these domains are still, yeah, we know very, very little about it. And, you know, like Dr. Lara says, in terms of how that works on a mass production scale, even less. So I think the research is still quite limited in some of the important areas.
Merci beaucoup. Et d'ailleurs, je tiens à rappeler que donc le rapport qui est basé sur de nombreuses études de la LSE montre bien et encourage le fait qu'il faut qu'il y ait une interdiction de l'élevage de pieuvres, et c'est basé sur vraiment de nombreuses études scientifiques. Alors, on va prendre une dernière question, je vous propose, donc de Vicky sur le lobbying. Donc, where is the lobbying by Compassion and your group being done? Is it at the EU level or at the member state level?
Well, since we published our report, we have been doing some lobbying work. We the same day that we launched and we published our report, we sent several letters to the Spanish government showing them our concerns. Also, we sent letters to the company. And also we sent a letter to the European Commission. After that, I presented the report in the Animal Welfare Intergroup of the European Parliament. We also have sent European Parliament question to the Commission, thanks to also MEP Francisco Guerreiro. I don't know if I'm saying correctly his name, sorry. And we are now planning other future actions to continue lobbying the Spanish government and also the Commission, especially the Commission.
Merci Elena. Nous, de notre côté, à Aquatic Life Institute, on est en contact avec le gouvernement français, notamment le ministère de l'Agriculture, avec qui on dialogue sur la question du bien-être des animaux aquatiques. Et donc, on va publier une tribune prochainement dans Le Monde avec Madame la députée, qui sera évidemment adressée au gouvernement français, puisqu'on souhaite vraiment qu'il y ait une prise de position publique, et d'autant plus qu'on est pendant la présidence française de l'Union européenne. Donc, on espère vraiment qu'il y aura des engagements forts. Et puis, évidemment, on travaille avec, et on fait partie de l'Eurogroupe for Animals. D'ailleurs, Doug a mis un lien direct sur le site de l'Eurogroupe avec les actions qui sont menées aussi actuellement sur la question spécifique des céphalopodes. Et d'ailleurs, n'hésitez pas à nous suivre sur les réseaux sociaux, sur Aquatic Life Institute, puisqu'on mettra le lien de cette tribune qui paraîtra prochainement. Alors, je vois qu'il y a encore d'autres commentaires et questions, mais je vous propose peut-être de s'arrêter là et puis on pourra peut-être y répondre dans le chat après. En tout cas, merci beaucoup à toutes et à tous d'avoir participé, d'avoir commenté, d'avoir suivi. Et merci bien sûr aux traductrices. Et puis, donc, vous pouvez revoir cette conférence ou la partager sur la page Facebook donc, de Caroline Roose. Merci encore à toutes et à tous et bonne journée.
Merci à toutes et au revoir et à très vite.